you want to. I just want to make sure everyone can see what I'm showing you. Okay, good. All right. So, so how I'm going to start this review session is how I started the last review session, is just kind of introducing you to a few things, introducing you to the test. And one thing I didn't do last week that I'm going to do now is just tell you a little bit about me and why I'm doing these reviews. And this is the only thing that you will see me for as far as your nursing program is concerned. My role within CCAC and nursing is purely just helping out with the dosage calculations. Um, I wrote the tests, I wrote the practice tests, I wrote these reviews up, and then I provided them to the instructors, and I've made several iterations of these exams and keys over the years. But I'm not the one who grades it. Okay. So, but I am the one who's going to show you how to answer these questions, what they're typically looking for. There are a few nuanced things that you might have to ask your lab instructor about to know how to answer these questions a little bit better. And then just getting it over with you. So you may hear some background noise because my kids just got home from school, and they get a little bit rambunctious now that they can, take their mask off and run around and scream and yell. So if you hear that in the background, that's what that is. So nobody's being tortured or anything. So all right. So a couple things to know about the test. Is the test itself is 25 questions. It's fill in the blank. I believe you are taking the test in person on paper. If I'm wrong about that, then I'm sure your lab instructor will have or your lab coordinator will have told you what to expect. The 25 questions, you can miss 2 out of the 25 and pass the test. If you miss more than 2, you're going to have to take a retest. After you're going to have to do some remediation, and then you're going to have to do a retest. And then after the retest, if you don't pass it again, then they're going to take you out of the semester, and you'll have to repeat the semester next year, or next I guess in the fall. So it is important that you pass this. Most of this stuff is things that you already know how to do. It's just you haven't looked at it in a while, and so that's what can make it frustrating. So let's get into some of the details here. The first thing I mentioned last week was you need to know these basic conversions. The ones that I have listed here are the ones that I have created test questions for and from. So you don't need to worry about converting inches to centimeters. You don't need to worry about calculating, the square area in centimeters of, doing like a topical cream or things like that. Those types of questions just aren't on this test. You will probably see those later on in your nursing education, but they're not going to be on this test. In fact, they're not on any of the tests that are written. The big thing though is you need to know these basic conversions. You need to know how to go from grams to milligrams. You need to know how to go from milligrams to micrograms, from liters to milliliters, kilograms to pounds, more importantly, pounds to kilograms, teaspoons to milliliters, tablespoons to milliliters, ounces to milliliters, and then going and converting between time. Okay, so these are the main ones that you need to know. And what I'd recommend you do is before you sit down to practice is write these down every single time, and then get in the habit of writing it down. That way, when you sit down for the test, you write those down, and it's one less thing you have to worry about. Okay. All right. We'll get into rounding. Make sure you read through these things. Some helpful equations. Some people like to use this desired or ordered over have times the quantity, such as, let's say the order is 500 milligrams of a particular medication. It's available in 250 milligram capsules. You would just do 500 over 250 times 1, and that gives you 2 capsules. If it is a suspension, the order is 500 milligrams. The suspension is available in 250 milligrams per 5 ml. Then that is how you would set up the desired over half. When you guys do flow rate questions, which I can't remember, I don't know that you have too many flow rate questions or any flow rate questions on this test, but you will definitely see it in second, third, and fourth semester. The flow rate is always going to be denoted as volume over time, which is milliliters per hour. So think about the infusion pump that you see, you know, by the patient bedside, where the IV is connected. You know, we need to be able to be infusing that fluid, and we're doing that using electricity. We're not just doing gravity, which obviously gravity is an option, but that's not what we're doing in our modern day facilities. And then just remember that it's volume over time, and sometimes they'll give you time in minutes. You need to convert minutes to hours, and that's that. You don't need to worry about the flow rate yet, but you'll see that later on. And then there is a fluid intake and output question. This is about you know, how much the patient is voiding or urinating, and then how much to replace the volume with so that they don't become dehydrated. And so this is a helpful formula for that. You take the actual fluid out over the original fluid out times whatever the replacement volume is, and then that will give you your new replacement volume, so you can toy with that. And then what I typically use and how I will demonstrate when I'm showing you guys how to do some of these questions, I use dimensional analysis. Okay. So if you don't like dimensional analysis, that's okay. You don't have to use dimensional analysis. I just prefer to utilize dimensional analysis because for me, it's easier to demonstrate and show you what it is that I'm trying to demonstrate and show you. All right. So before we get started, any kind of review, do any of you have any questions about the test or what you might see on the test? If you don't have any questions right away, I'm just going to go through and start reviewing some of the practice stuff. Okay. Well, if you do have a question, just know that you can stop me at any time and just let me know. All right. So I'm going to move over to the 110 practice test. Do these questions look familiar to you?
Yes.
The numbers?
Yep.
Go ahead, Jared.
No, they do. They look familiar.
Oh, whoops. I just realized I had my volume on mute. Go ahead, Jared.
No, they look familiar.
Okay, good. So what I think they did is they took these problems and then they converted it to Blackboard questions. Okay. The funny thing is, if they had asked me, I could have done it really easily because I have the originals, but that's okay. I don't need to do any extra work, I don't think, anyway. So, all right. So looking at these first few questions, do any of you have any questions on any of these 1 through 10? And if you want to just throw a number down in the chat, that's fine. If you want to unmute and say, do number 10, you know, just tell me what you want. Or if you got these down pat, we don't need to waste time on them.
Can you show a milliliter to ounces one?
Sure. Like number 6?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And if you have other questions, just type them into the chat. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn on my webcam. And we're going to see if we can get that to work. All right. So 200 milliliters to ounces. Okay. All right. You all see my hand here. I'm going to try and make sure I draw out really well. So good. Seeing the thumbs up. Okay. So the question was, how do we go? I'm going to change my. Last time I had to raise this up. So let me do that real quick. I want to make sure you guys can see everything. Good. So the question said, I want to go from 200 milliliters and I want to know how many ounces that is. Okay. So that's the question. Now, when I do this question, so first of all, something you need to know. When you go from the metric system, which is what milliliters is denoted in, to the standard American standard system, when you go from in between the two systems, you may want to and you may need to round for those types of problems. Okay. So when you stay within the same metric system, so if I was going from milliliters to liters or liters to milliliters, you do not round when you're doing basic inter-unit conversions. Okay. But when you go from the metric system to we'll just call it the American standard system, do not, or you will likely need to round those in some cases. So we have 200 milliliters. We know that 1 ounce is equal to 30 milliliters, right? So we know that, okay? Now, because we know that, we can set up and like I said, I'm going to show you dimensional analysis for these. I can set up a equation to help me convert milliliters to ounces. So I always ask myself this question. What do I want? Well, I want ounces. What am I trying to get rid of? Well, I'm trying to get rid of milliliters. And then the last little question I always have is, do I have a way to go from ounces to milliliters or milliliters to ounces? And that's why we have these basic conversions. Okay. So 30 milliliters, 1 ounce. And then I'm going to take my calculator. And that's the other thing. You will have a calculator on your test. Okay. So you'll be able to use a calculator. So I type in 200 divided by 30, and I get 6.6666, and then just keeps on repeating. Okay. So like I told you, you're probably going to have to round to the nearest 10th when you have a problem like this. And that's perfectly fine because you're going in between you're going between different units. So the answer to this question would actually be 6.7 ounces. Any number greater than 1, so I'm just going to write this out. If you have a number greater than 1, you're going to round to the 10th. If you have a number less than 1, you're going to round to the 100th. Okay. So the 10th place, the 100th place in regards to where that is in the decimal. Okay. Now, in reality, most of the time, you're probably going to be converting ounces to milliliters because everything that you do as far as in medicine and healthcare, everything's always going to go and refer back to the metric system because the metric system is the universal system that's used everywhere else in the world. Canada, the UK, Europe, Asia, everywhere. Just in America, we also have this other system that includes things that you've grown up with, like miles and gallons and things like that. But everywhere else uses, or the majority of the world uses the metric system. So who's the weird ones? It's probably us here in America. But then we always, in medicine, definitely, we always convert it back to the metric units. Okay, so I'm going back to my share here. That was going from milliliters to ounces. Notice that you would also have a similar situation when you would go from pounds to kilograms. You most likely are going to end up rounding to the nearest 10th. Okay. I'm just looking to see where my, yeah, I guess I don't want to do that. Okay. All right. Stop that for a second. All right. So So it doesn't sound like there's any questions here. It sounds like you guys feel pretty good about doing these basic conversions. So let's move on down. Any questions for 11, 12, or 13? And like I said, even if you got the answer right, but you just want to kind of see it worked out, just let me know.
What does BID mean again?
Okay, good. So the word BID, or the abbreviation BID, basically stands for twice a day. So there's some common abbreviations that might be in your review packet. There's a whole list of common abbreviations. If you do a Google search for common medical abbreviations or pharmacy abbreviations, that'd be helpful to look over. So BID is twice a day. QD is every day. TID is 3 times a day. Then there's QID, which would be 4 times a day. And then the other way you would see the how many times to deliver a dose might be like Q12H, Q8H, Q6H, and that just tells you how many hours in between to give that. So I know, like, I just was recently giving my my dog some topical treatments for an ear infection, and then some something for her, like, to deal with like itching. And you know, they wrote out every 24 hours, but they probably, the shorthand, they would have written Q24H. Okay. Does anyone know why this is 2 capsules and not 4 capsules?
Because it's just saying how many capsules will you give, so that's automatically just 1 capsule.
Say that one more time.
So if it doesn't specify how many capsules, it'll always just be 1. So it'll say your patient receives 500 milligrams twice a day. You will give how many capsules? So it'll just be times 1 capsule.
Okay. Well, you mean times 1 dose, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Yep. And that's exactly correct. Yeah. So I want to know how many to give in that moment. So a little side note, a little tip, a little helpful tip here is, remember that if it, or on the test, it should always tell you per dose or per day. Okay. If it doesn't say either, then you assume that it means per dose, because that's ideally when you would be administering the medication. Meaning like for this person, like in a day, they would take 2 in the morning, 2 at night. So 4 total. You don't need to take out 4 and then hold on to the other 2 until 12 hours later. That would just be crazy, right? So you would wait until later in the afternoon to do that. Okay. So I had a few, I had someone ask me about 10 and 11. So I'm going to go ahead and work those out real quick. And then let's see what that looks like here. Okay. So 10 is going from 1.5 ounces to 1.5 ounces to milliliters. And then 11 is calculating urine output. So let me turn on my screen and stop the share here. And this should still be spotlighted. Okay, good. All right. So the first question was, I want to go from 1.5 ounces to milliliters. And so I'm going to work that the same way I worked out the previous question. Okay. I'm going to take the 1.5 ounces. So they wrote out ounces, so I'll write out ounces. And then I want to know how many milliliters that is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what I know. Okay. So I know I have 1.5 ounces. I'm going to set up a an equation. Like I said, I'm using dimensional analysis. You do not need to use dimensional analysis. It's just the one I choose to use. The question I ask myself, what do I want? Milliliters. What do I want to get rid of? Ounces. And the reason I'm saying that stuff is before I do anything, I can cross those out and I know that I've set the problem up the right way. If you have ounces times ounces, you get ounces squared, and nobody wants to deal with that. Okay. So 1 ounce is how many milliliters? 30. 30 times 1.5 is 45 milliliters. Now, the nice thing is anytime you go from ounces to milliliters or even kilograms to pounds, you're usually going to end up with a whole number, which is helpful because then you don't have to worry about rounding. You really are only going to have to worry about rounding when you go from metric to actually pounds and kilograms is a little bit different because 1 pound or 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram. So never mind, just ignored us saying I was not on that. So so someone asked, do we have to go double dimensional analysis? I think you're asking, do you have to show like both steps of dimensional analysis for certain problems? No. When they say show your work, you can show your work any way you wish. They just want to see that you're actually doing it and showing your work. So like I said, there's a variety of different ways to do that. So some things might require more than one step, but you can always just break them up into different steps if you want to. You don't have to do one long dimensional analysis like you did back when you were calculating like moles and molecules and atoms when you were doing chemistry, when you have your nightmares about dimensional analysis. Okay, so that was number 10. Let me look at 11. So number 11, and I know I don't have it displayed, but we'll come back to it. It says for every 125 milliliters of urine output, we're going to replace with 40 milliliters of water via PEG tube every 4 hours. If the urine output for the last 4 hours is 500 milliliters, what would the fluid replacement volume be? So I mentioned before that the way I would set this up, or there's actually, instead of doing dimensional analysis for this one, and really this is the exception, I'm technically doing dimensional analysis, but I just try to do this more of a simplified way. And so what I mentioned in the review stuff is a formula that where you take the actual volume out. So when I say actual volume out, what I mean is how much did the patient actually void? And so they actually voided 500 milliliters. Okay, so they actually voided 500 milliliters. Then what was the expected output? Well, the expected output was the 125 milliliters. So when I say actual over the expected, that these are the numbers I'm referring to. And honestly, the way I write the test questions, like 11 and 12 are basically the same test question. I just use different numbers, right? And then that's how you would see that organized. Then I would just take this and multiply by the replacement volume, which is 40 milliliters. So what would change in this particular type of problem? Well, the things that would change would be how much was out, what was expected to go out, and what would be replaced. But you just need to organize it in this manner, and that'll get you to the answer you're looking for, which in this case, I believe comes out to 160 milliliters. The reason I don't necessarily show dimensional analysis with this is because everything's in milliliters, right? So everything either cancels out or left, but basically we're just trying to calculate a replacement volume. I think what a lot of people have done, and maybe you did this too, is you reasoned through the question. You probably said to yourself, so give me 1 second, I'm going to pop back over to this. You may have said to yourself, okay, I have hold on 1 second. Okay. get back here. All right. You may have said to yourself, okay, if I have 100, for every 125 milliliters there are out, I have 40 milliliters. And then for every and then if it was 500 milliliters, we know that we're going to be replacing with more than 40, right? So what would be 80 milliliters replaced? Well, that would be 250 because I just doubled that amount, right? What about, triple that amount, right? That would be 375. Okay, so 375, and now I'm up to 40, 80, 120. Then another 125, you're at 160 milliliters, and you can see how that kind of works out. Okay. All right.
Quick
Okay.
question about that. So
Yeah.
I originally wrote it down as 125 over 45 times 4. So that's where you got the numbers to do the actual equation, right?
Right. Yeah. You just organized it upside down essentially. What was your answer when you got that?
So when I did, give me 1 second. So when I did 125 divided by 45, it was 2.777 repeating, and then times 4, it was 11.111 repeating.
Right.
But when you multiply both the numerator and denominator by 4, I ended up with the 500 over 125.
Okay.
So that makes more sense.
Okay, I see where you did 4. So you did, all you would need to do with that number 4 that you got to is just 4 times 40, and that would have given you the answer.
Oh,
what,
okay.
what you did was you did 500 divided by 125. That's where you got 4 from. And then if you had just multiplied that number by 40, that's where that had to go. But that's also why I showed you the alternative way, just because that way, if you're getting a number less than 40 and they voided out 500, they're going to need more than 40 milliliters, right?
Okay. I think the reason that I did it that way was because I saw the last 4 hours.
Okay.
So I took the 125 over 45 and then multiplied it by 4.
Okay.
And that's how I got the same numbers that you got, and then multiplied it by the 40 and got the 160.
Okay. Well, the time really doesn't matter. So don't get hung up on the time. The time actually has nothing to do with solving this, because it could have been, they could have checked it at 8 hours. They're just happening to be checking it every 4 hours. Okay. So they could be checking it every 2 hours, or like question 12 says they checked it every 3 hours. It doesn't really matter. You still are going to replace it with whatever amount needs to be replaced.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. So keep in mind, when you answer questions that have a cup associated with it, make sure you mark on the cup. Okay. So your instructors may have specific requests on how they want you to mark the cup, but just know that you need to mark the cup when you are on the test. So like if I were marking this cup, let me see, I should be able to annotate. If I was marking the cup, so like this question, I already know the answer is 30 because I have it written out here. I would mark the cup, either I would mark it like at 30, I would circle this, whatever they want you to do, just make sure you denote and make sure you mark the cup. A lot of times people aren't missing questions on the test because of math. They're missing questions on the test because they didn't mark something that was being asked to mark. When you, I got to clear my annotation because otherwise that's just going to stay there. The other thing I'll say about the these questions, notice that this is something new. It says milliequivalents. Okay, milliequivalents, we haven't really, you probably don't even know what that is. Really, a milliequivalent is just a way to measure potassium chloride. Okay, so it doesn't really matter that it is milliequivalents. It just matters that there is that it's a particular unit. Plus, if you follow dimensional analysis, like I've been showing you, you will eliminate milliequivalents and you'll just be left with milliliters anyways. And that's one way to do that. The other thing is you can kind of rationalize through this problem. If you know what you have available is 20 milliequivalents per 15 ml and the order is 40, you need 2 times 20, right, to get you to 40, and 2 times 15 would be 30. Okay. The other thing is anytime they give you a question that has a cup pictured, your answer is going to be on the cup. Okay. So just keep that in mind. The answer will be on the cup because they don't want you to guess. They don't want you to get like 12.5 and try and guess where that is on the cup. They don't want you to guess. They want you to be specific. Okay. I saw someone had a question here. Hold on one second. Okay, I'll have to address this. Give me one second. Okay. All right. Okay. Another thing that is important to know, just keep in mind when you're doing some of these practice questions, make sure you answer it how they want you to answer it. So this is asking you to answer it and give you the answer in teaspoons. But notice it gives you the dose available in milliliters. Okay. Now, this is another thing that might be helpful. If you do a Google image search of drug labels, you can see how these things are denoted. So like notice that this says 125 milligram per 5 ml. This is a suspension. It tells you it's a suspension. This right here is also a suspension. It tells you 125 milligrams or 2,000 or 200,000 units per 5 ml. So it gives you the strength of each thing. Okay. So let me work this one out just because I want to show you 2 ways to get to the correct answer. And I think that it might be helpful. So let me go back to my screen's already open there. So let me stop the share, go back here. Okay. Oh, and then someone's asking about number 14, and I will definitely get to that. Okay. So the question says, or the, I should say, the order says, or it says you are to administer 250 milligrams of dilantin PO by mouth. Okay. So my order is 250 milligrams. You'll notice that I always start, when I'm doing these drug calculations, I always start with the order. Okay. So the order is 250 milligrams. And then the question is, how many teaspoons will you give if it's labeled as shown below? So the way it's labeled is 125 milligrams per 5 ml. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you 2 ways in order to kind of answer this question. So I'm going to show you the long way first. So I know that I can go from milligrams to milliliters. So what do I want to get rid of? What do I want? Okay, 5 mLs, and then what was it, 125 milligrams. So I know how to go from milligrams to milliliters, and then and I also know how to go from milliliters to teaspoons, because you already know how to do that because it's part of the things you need to know how to do. So if I were doing this like this, I would set this up, find out how many milliliters, which it would be 10. And then I would create a separate conversion in which I would convert milliliters to teaspoons, where 1 teaspoon is equal to 5 milliliters. And that will give me 2 teaspoons, which is the answer that we were looking for. Now, I told you there was a shortcut. The shortcut is this. I could have circumvented the teaspoon issue if I had just made the conversion right off the bat. Since I already know that 5 milliliters is equivalent to 1 teaspoon, I could have just written 1 teaspoon instead, and I would have gotten my answer of 2 teaspoons. So you don't have to do both steps. If you already know that 5 milliliters equals a teaspoon, then just go ahead and exchange it, switch it out. Okay. Later on or next semester, you'll be calculating drop rates where you have to do drops per minute. And it'll tell you like it's infusing at 100 milliliters per hour. Well, instead of per hour, since you already know you're going into minutes, just quickly convert hours to minutes. So instead of 100 milliliters per hour, it's 100 milliliters per 60 minutes. Just go ahead and just do that exchange right away. If you prefer doing the two-step method, that's not a problem. It doesn't take any more time. It's just something that you pick up on, and I wanted to show you because some of you were probably like, no, I did that in my head. I didn't need to write it down. But what I'm telling you is when you actually take the test, they want you to write it down. So make sure you are writing down your questions. Okay.
Can I ask a really stupid question?
Yeah, I love stupid questions.
Well, I wasn't here for the last one, but just to make sure I understand. So in this case, the way you got that answer, we're dividing 250 by the denominator, which is 125. So that gets 2, and then we're multiplying that by 1 to get 2. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I usually tell everyone multiply across the top and then divide by the bottom. So I would do 250 times 1 divided by 125, and we'd get to the same answer.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. If you were doing ordered over half, it would be the same, that you would just do 250 over 125 times 1. You got it. Not a stupid question at all. The way I'm writing it, and I should also clarify, this is just the way I'm showing it to you guys. Okay. If you're doing it a different way and you're getting the right answers, keep doing it that way. Okay. I'm not here to tell you your way that you're doing it is wrong, especially if you're getting the right answer every time. But if sometimes you get the right answer and sometimes you get an answer that doesn't make any sense, then I'm telling you to adjust your strategy. And this is one strategy that works really, really well for all of the things, all the drug calc stuff that you'll do for the next, 4 semesters. This covers it. Okay. There are other techniques and methods. You can do ratios, proportions, but what I've learned over the years is that nursing students hate math. And so I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. And desired over have is simple, but it doesn't work 100% of the time. It works 95% of the time, but the 5% you need it, you really do need to know another strategy when you go into like 3rd semester, 4th semester. So you don't need to worry about that now. You can worry about that in a couple of years or a couple of semesters. All right. So someone asked for number 14. Oh, okay. So we kind of discussed this one, but let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen just so anyone that's watching the replay. So number 14, we're going to talk about KCl, which stands for potassium chloride. The order is 40 milliequivalents POQID with juice, and the available, what's in stock is potassium chloride 20 milliequivalents per 15 ml. And we want to know how many milliliters to give per dose. Okay. So in order to solve this particular question, step 1, we need a new piece of paper. So again, the order for this is 40 milliequivalents. Okay. And then what I have available is 20 milliequivalents per 15 ml. And I want to know how many milliliters to administer. So using dimensional analysis, I don't want milliequivalents. I do want milliliters. So that helps you to know where to put things. There's 20 milliequivalents per 15 ml. And then what you can do is there's 1 of 2 ways, since this was asked. You can multiply across the top and then divide by the bottom, or 20 goes in the 42 times, 2 times 15 gives you 30 milliliters. Okay. So you can, like I said, there's no one way to do this. If you were doing design or ordered over half, you would take your 40 milliequivalents, the order over what you have available, the 20 milliequivalents, and then make sure you multiply by that by the quantity, which is the milliliters. And it's the exact same thing. So if you are setting it up this way, I just want you to know that we're doing the exact same thing in both situations. Okay. Neither one of these is different. It's just that it's organized different. Okay. So you are still getting, you'll still get to the right answer if you do it that way. Okay. Okay. Let me see if there's any, just want to see if there's anything that I think, okay. So when you do like these questions here, where you have this thing called a tubex, it's going to ask you to mark the tubex. So make sure you do in fact mark the tubex, which basically just means make sure you put the an arrow where it needs to go. So if I were annotating this, which I'll show you right now, so it says, 75 milligrams of Demerol and 50 milligrams per milliliter is the available. So 75 over 50 is 1.5 milliliters. So notice that you don't have 1.5 here, but you do have a 1.5, and this is where you would put your mark. You would mark it at 1.5. When they say mark it, that's what they mean. Now, one of the things you might want to look at is, so this is 0.5. So this should be 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 2. Okay. So these are each a tenth of a milliliter. Okay. So let's say the answer was 0.9 milliliters. Okay. This mark right here would denote 0.9 milliliters. Okay. So just so you know where these things are. So you could get down to, 0.1. So here's 0.5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You could administer technically 0.1 milliliters from this tubex. Looks like the max is 3 milliliters. Okay. A couple things that are important to note as well. IM means intramuscular. So IM, IV, SC for subcutaneous, IV for intravascular, all those tell you that you're dealing with a liquid thing, right? You're not going to crush up an aspirin and then try and push that through a needle into someone's bloodstream, right? If you wanted to do that, you could create a suspension, but they're going to do that for you in the pharmacy, so you don't have to get too creative. Okay. I just wanted to see if you had any flow rate type questions in here before I ignore any of that stuff. Okay. Did anyone have any questions on how to label the syringe?
Can you go over it just to be safe?
Absolutely. All right. So there are a couple of things when you're labeling the syringe. Well, first of all, the only images that I have are these images here. So this is what you're going to see. So you're always going to be choosing B. Okay. That's always the syringe that you're going to choose. Now, there's a couple ways that they want you to answer this. And one of the things I would tell you to do is make sure you write it out. So it tells you the solution and amount to be drawn up first. Now, you probably haven't gone through this yet, but basically when you're dealing with insulin and you're dealing with mixing insulin, regular is always drawn up first, followed by whatever other type of insulin there is. Okay. Regular insulin is clear insulin. The other types of insulin are considered cloudy insulin. So it's always clear before cloudy, but regular before any other type. So there's NPH, and there's other variations of insulin. They're just escaping my mind what the other types are. So it says solution amount to be drawn up first. So the solution to be drawn up first would be regular first. And then I wrote first mark at 10 units. This is actually incorrect. Okay. So I would just tell you that the regular first is what's going to be drawn up. And then 50 units total is where you would actually start marking your syringe. Okay, so the correct total is 10 plus 40. I don't think anyone's got a problem with that. So we would say, here's my total, right, at 50. So you might even denote that and just write total. Okay, now that's our total amount. Now, because the regular insulin was drawn up first, that 10 units is actually closer to where the 50 is. And when I say that, I mean in a hypothetical sense. If you pull up YouTube videos and you see when they draw up the insulin and they draw up the regular and then they draw up the NPH or whatever other type of insulin, it all mixes together. Okay. But in the hypothetical situation, what they're wanting you to denote is the fact that your regular insulin hypothetically would exist within this range right here. So this is actually, I'm just going to put a big R here. Your regular insulin is the 10 units between your total and, or 10 units down from your total. Okay. So between 50 and 40 is where your, and I'm doing air quotes right now. I know you can't see me, but air quotes, regular insulin. Okay. The other insulin, the NPH, is going to be down between 0 and 40, but you don't have to mark that. Okay. So when they ask you to mark the syringe, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for you to denote the two marks. The regular is going to be between, is going to be the number of units below the total number. Okay. Now, I shared, and I will make sure, actually, let me do that right now real quick. I want to make sure you guys have a copy of the, give me 1 second. I want to make sure you guys have a copy of my additional practice tests and some review stuff. So let me pull that up real quick. And I have a shared folder. And if you were here last week, I shared that with you. I'm going to put it in the comments here in just a second. So let me pull it up. If I can find it, hold on. Okay. I got it. All right. Well, apparently this is not clearing my annotations anymore, but that's okay. Let's see if we can, oh, here we go. Okay. All right. I'm putting into everyone, here's the link so you can download an additional practice test to practice. And there's also a link to my YouTube channel so you can access some other review material. Plus, this is where I'll post the recording for this session will be on YouTube, so you have access to it. And I'll get it posted up probably this evening. And then I also have a showing how to mark the syringe. So make sure that you review that. Additionally, some people like to know, since I asked somebody to email me, it's probably helpful that you have my email address. And I'm putting that into the chat as well. So it's my first initial last name at ccac.edu. And so you have that there. Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes. Do you have any questions?
question.
Yes.
On the orientation Blackboard site where you posted the practice quiz for the test, I noticed like when I was doing, I did it multiple times and I would like fail even though the answer is right. And I figured it's because I put the units on there, like ml at the end of, like I put my answer in, I say 50 ml is my answer, like I would fail. But after I realized, after a while, after I did it again and I did not put the units on there, I got all the answers right. So should we do that for the test or no?
Okay, so very good question. So some of that is just you're talking about the practice test that's on Blackboard, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So on the paper test, I would definitely make sure you write your units. So if it's milliliters, if it's tablets, if it's capsules, make sure you write your units. Unless it's something like I'm going to go up to because some of them have like a blank and then ML, and that might be where the issue was. I believe like even this question, I think in the original, like this is underline and then ML. So there's that. If that's what it was, that was just a nuance on the test. So, and that's just practice. If that were an actual test, they would probably give you more specific instructions about putting your units in versus just the numbers. But on the actual test, I would definitely make sure that you put your numbers or your units associated with your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very good question. You're welcome.
Has it been solidified if we're doing this on paper or on the computer? Because we've been told in our class that this will be on the computer.
Okay. That last week I had heard that it was going to be on paper, so I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, like I said, I just do the reviews, so how they conduct them is going to be different, and so that would be interesting to see. I know that they've done this on the computer with the other semesters because second, third, and fourth semester you have this test like week 1. And so I know that they have already done it on Blackboard. So they must have a way to kind of distinguish, like if you put the answer, they might tell you just to put the numbers only. That way you don't miss problems because you know that. But for what I heard last week was it's going to be on a paper test, but it could be online. So just be prepared either way. And I'm sure your instructors are communicating how they are going to do it. So. Yeah, if they want you to show your work, it will likely be on paper, but if they can't because of like COVID precautions and you're not and they don't want you to do the test in person, then you just won't be able to show your work. So you'll just have to do it online. So I'm sure, like I said, it'll be communicated. I believe they want you to do it in person. That way they can see that you are showing your work, but I don't know specifically. So someone mentioned that in the so I know some of you are like, what's he talking about? Someone private messaged me or direct messaged me. And so that was the context, is that most likely it'll be a paper test because they want you to show your work. That could be true. I don't know. And then I'll just leave you with this. One of the things that you'll see when you go to the practice, there's a mock test that I've created. So it's a little bit different, but notice that some of these things are the same, but some of the numbers are different. Notice here when we're looking at your key like this right here, I didn't round that to the 10th. I leave it alone. You don't round basic inter-unit conversions. So like, let's say this was like this 1.75 here. You would not round that to 1.8. No. Okay, don't round that. But 128 to pounds to kilograms, I did round that to the nearest 10th. Okay. Notice here, I didn't round that number either. 0.025. I just left it as it is. Okay. you'll see that some of these things, like this is a variation of that question you were asked that you saw that we looked at earlier. How many capsules would you give per day? So your answer would be 4 capsules per day, because you got to account for your BID. Okay. If this said 500 milligrams TID, 2 times 3 would be 6 capsules per day. Okay. Let's see here. So this is just another variation of what you've already seen. It's just in a little bit of a different order. There's some suspension questions that'll be good to look at. Notice here this answer, we don't round that to the nearest 10th because it's a number less than 1. Okay. Number less than 1, you'd round to the nearest 100th, which is what this is rounded to. Okay. So 0.35. Notice that I got away from making a note saying to first mark at 36. I don't say that anymore. Okay. Because that's not correct as far as marking your syringes. Okay. You want to make a mark. So the total would be at 64. So you'd make a mark at 64 units, and then 64 minus 36 is where you would make your other mark to indicate where the regular insulin is, air quotes, located. Okay. So that'll be another one for you guys to practice. So the test and then the key are posted there in that link that I shared with you guys. So I will be back here on Tuesday, same time, 4:15 to 5:15. If you can't make it, I will be posting these on YouTube, and then you can access the YouTube channel link. I think on Blackboard, I think that you have that, and then also the link that I shared with you guys here in the chat. So, all right, I will talk to you guys next week or next time. And if I don't, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.